Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about Jameis Winston potentially coming to Atlanta. He recently hopped on a very popular sports podcast and talked about Atlanta. And then we'll talk about Calais Campbell possibly returning to the Falcons. But really quickly, make sure to like the video. The more likes we get, the more boost we get from YouTube to more Falcons fans. So if you enjoy our free content, liking the video is literally all we ask. Now, let's get into Jameis Winston coming to Atlanta potentially. So, allow me to kind of set the scene for you. Jameis Winston hopped on Barstool Sports' podcast, Part of My Take. If you know PMT, you know everything I'm about to say. If you're unfamiliar with Part of My Take, it's a very, how do I put it? Don't take yourself too seriously type of podcast. They love to have guests on. They love to make jokes. It is not supposed to be some big J blue checkmark type of podcast. They really let their hair down and let things loose a little bit. So, while he was on PMT, they said, hey, we're going to throw out a couple random cities. And they all happen to be cities that had a QB opening, like Atlanta, Seattle, Washington, Denver. And they go, of those cities, which one would you like to go to? AKA, of these teams, where would you like to play next? In a very indirect way of asking. And here's what Jameis said. Anyone that accepts me, but I'll just say this, Atlanta. I grew up an hour and a half from Atlanta. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I think that would be a beautiful time for my family. The accessibility it has to be my surrounding family, that would be beautiful. Now, I love Jameis. You love Jameis in the sense of Jameis is just entertaining. He is fun. He is funny. The league is better when Jameis is a part of ESPN's not top 10 plays. But this is a plan D/E scenario if we're talking about the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons in 2024. Jameis is fun to watch from afar. I don't know how much fun Jameis is when he's your quarterback. It's more fun when you're watching Jameis and he throws a pick six in overtime against the Falcons to close out the year. I enjoy that Jameis a lot more than watching Jameis throw the pick six as my quarterback. Now, the last time Jameis actually really played meaningful football, 2021. Remember, he came over from Tampa Bay, backed up Drew Brees. Drew Brees retires. Jameis takes over as the starter. Unfortunately, tore his ACL a third of the way into the year, but he had 14 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Like, he was playing some of his best football. And then a lot changed since then. Sean Payton retired. Jameis got benched pretty much. He got benched for Andy Dalton and then never regained that starting role. But if you go back in time to Jameis Winston's season in 2019 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 60% completion percentage, 5,100 yards, and then the 30 for 30 club. Him and Ronald Acuna are the 30 club members in Atlanta potentially. 33 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, a very different 30-30 club. I think Jameis Winston joins a QB battle team. And that could be Atlanta. I'm not ruling out the Falcons, right? If they were to draft a rookie in round 2, I don't think they're going to hand him the starting role right off the bat. So there could be a scenario go, listen, let's bring Jameis in, have him compete with this rookie, and let's get the best possible quarterback on the field. But I think a lot of other things would have to happen before Atlanta got to this step. I sure hope/believe Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot are not sitting down going, all right, let's plan out our quarterback strategy for this offseason. And target number 1 is Jameis Winston. Now, I think there's a few more steps in between Jameis coming to Atlanta. But let me know what you think. Should Atlanta sign Jameis Winston? I think Jameis Winston could serve as an excellent backup, a fringe starter if you really want to push this rookie or something like that for the starting role. I also think he's really matured and developed from maybe some of his antics at Tallahassee. And all I've heard is great things about the way he handled his benching in New Orleans and the way he's done his best to help mentor and bring along the younger players on the Saints. So I think adding Jameis Winston to the Falcons locker room could only be a good thing up until you remember the last play of the game in Week 18, 2023. That might be a bit of a hurdle for some people to get over when he handed it off to Jamal Williams, which on PMT they did talk about that play, and he said the Falcons' defensive line knew they were not kneeing it. I don't know how much I believe that. Maybe some guys knew. I don't think everyone knew. But that might be something where the Falcons just write off Jameis for going, no, our whole team hates his guts for that. We're not bringing that into this locker room. Find a different quarterback. That's a real possibility. Okay, if I had to give a rough preference order, again, it's only February, so a lot of dominoes could fall and things could change, but this would be my dream preference order. Number 1 is Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, or Jayden Daniels. Ideally at pick number 8. If it involves some level of a trade up, okay, we can talk about that once that trade happens. But for now, that's goal number 1. Get one of those 3 quarterbacks. Number 2, Justin Fields. I like Justin Fields. I know not everyone likes Justin Fields. I'm a Justin Fields believer. Number 3, Kirk Cousins. I like Kirk Cousins, and I think he's better than Justin Fields right now. I think the price element is what knocks him slightly below Fields, right? Justin Fields could be a very cheap option compared to Kirk Cousins for the next 2 seasons. Whereas if Kirk Cousins gets $90 million at the age of 36 coming off an Achilles tear, that could be a recipe for utter humiliation for the Falcons if Kirk Cousins comes up and he is very far from his peak days. Number 4 is Russell Wilson. Sign him for a vet minimum deal because that's what he's going to take because everything is offset from his contract with Denver. And let's be honest, if Russell Wilson was on this team in 2023, they are probably hosting a playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles. And number 5, I'll go with Jameis for the laughs. The dude's just funny. I don't know how else to put it. He is just a very, very funny guy. All right, next up on the show, Calais Campbell. Is he returning to the Falcons? He recently did an interview with a reporter from the AJC, and we're going to talk about that next up on the show. But first, I have to give a shout-out to our sponsor today, which is Game Time. With Game Time, you can get $20 off any sporting event in your local area. Obviously, there's no Falcons games to go to for quite some time, but if you want to go catch a Hawks game, if you want to get a Braves spring training game in, or any other sporting event in your local area, plus comedy, theater, musicals, all that good stuff, you can do that with Game Time. Plus, if you're going to the big game this upcoming weekend, you can save $100 when you go to Game Time and redeem code Vegas100. We all know that tickets to the big game are not the cheapest thing in the world, but thankfully with Game Time, you can at least save yourself an extra $100, and you can put that towards parking, concessions, hotels, anything you need. I know it'd be a bit last minute, but hey, if you're a last minute kind of person, at least save yourself $100 with Game Time by using code Vegas100. But for any other sporting event, comedy show, theater event in your area, get $20 off when you use code FalconsChat. One more time, that is code FalconsChat for $20 off when you download Game Time today. Terms apply, but it's the best place for last-minute tickets. I love using Game Time, and I'm sure you will as well. All that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Now, switching gears, let's get back to Calais Campbell. So he had, I thought, a very good season for Atlanta in 2023. I'm given the age element, how long he's been in the league for. He played with a high motor. He wasn't someone who was just completely gassed in the fourth quarter and didn't have a whole lot left in the tank in the last quarter of the season. But given the age element, I don't think it's a surefire thing he would even return to any team in 2024. Now, he did do an interview with the AJC, and here's what he had to say. The last time I talked to Terry, he told me to let him know when I know. He was definitely eager to get me back if I want to play football again. But he was going to respect my process and let me go through it the way I go through it. Honestly, I'm game for Calais Campbell to return. I understand that it was just one season, but it did feel like he brought some great leadership qualities to this locker room. And that's a locker room that doesn't really have a clear-cut voice on the defensive side. Before he got there, you have Grady Jarrett and A.J. Terrell, who are awesome players on the field, but I felt like that locker room really needed a more veteran mentor to kind of bring some of the young and up-and-coming players along. And I think Calais Campbell did a fantastic job of that. He's also a Walter Payton Man of the Year, so you know you're getting one of the best human beings in the National Football League. And he's also still pretty productive. 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Yeah, those aren't his peak day numbers from his time in Arizona, but I'll still take them. It's not like Atlanta's got a whole bunch of young defensive ends waiting to break through and get playing time. They do have Zach Harrison, who they drafted last year out of Ohio State, and he had some really good games towards the end of the season. But I'm all for at least bringing Calais Campbell back, and maybe he's not a starter anymore, but being a part of that rotation, I don't see a negative to it. Now, if they decide to go a different direction for whatever reason, here are some other free agent defensive ends to keep an eye on. A.J. Epinesa from the Buffalo Bills, Dorrance Armstrong from the Cowboys. Chase Young is an interesting name to watch for. Very curious to see what his future holds. Jadeveon Clowney with the Ravens, and then Jonathan Grenard with the Houston Texans. So those are some other free agents to watch for. But let me know, would you bring Calais Campbell back? I do want to get your opinion on this. I'm all for it. I mean, it's not going to cost you much. I think Calais Campbell wanting to come back, or at least having some level of interest coming back, also is a good indication of he thinks there's something in Atlanta. And maybe that decision comes once he knows who the quarterback is. But he came to the Falcons because he knew he didn't have many years left in the league. And he felt like the Falcons were a team where he could go and compete. And so if Campbell wants to come back, I think that's a good sign from a player of where he thinks this team is headed. And hopefully it's headed in the right direction. Now, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Falcons Today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I always appreciate people that take time out of their day to come hang out with us. If you're not subscribed yet, consider going ahead and doing so. It's completely free, so I probably shouldn't say this, but if you don't like the content after like a few days or a week, you can just unsubscribe. It's not one of those like tricks where you give your credit card information and then we bill you secretly in 2 weeks. No, just join the channel for funsies.